All right, welcome everyone to the Ronin Institute public seminar this week. If you are new, a visitor, one of our external visitors, Ronin Institute for Independent Scholarship is dedicated to supporting high quality scholarship by independent and non-traditional scholars and trying to work together to build a new model of how to do academia. If you have questions during the course of the talk, you can put them in the chat function. That's probably the best way to do it. And our speaker will probably should be encouraged to ignore those during the talk itself, but it's a great way to sort of keep track of your questions so that he can address those at the end. So today's speaker is Keith Say. He has been a Ronin Institute research scholar for a little over 2 years right now, and is a very active community member, functioning also as our community journalist. He keeps all of us up to date on what is going on with the news of the world related to academia and scholarship. His academic work is on languages and linguistics, particularly formal syntax in a Chomskyan framework. Today, he is going to talk about the history of linguistics and the development of biolinguistics. And let's see. If you're interested in learning more about Keith or how to reach out to him, you can find him on our website here. And in general, if you're interested in more things about the Ronin Institute, come check out the website. Many of our seminars are posted to our YouTube channel there. Our next public seminar will probably be early 2021. And you can also reach out for information to our seminars address at seminars@roninstitute.org. So thank you everyone for coming. And I am going to stop sharing my screen now and hand it over to Keith so he can share his. And Keith, take it away.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to John for that intro. I'm trying to find the right slide. Yeah. So can you see everything? Is everything clear? And yeah. It's everything. Thank you very much. And thank you. Yeah. So before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge you numerous people for this. Is that I'd like to thank numerous people for this. First of all, to John for inviting me to join the Ronin Institute. Back in July 2018, and for everything that he's done for me since, like funding, etc. To Uriagereka and to Alex, for organizing this and for advertising, so the entire world knows about it. I want to thank my mentors and supervisors in linguistics. Especially Professor Nigel Vincent, Professor Ian Roberts at the University of Cambridge. I just saw that on the list that he may be here right now. So if he's here, I'd like to say a big thank you to him and for all that he's done for me. At York, which is where I'm at the moment, George Soulas, Pino Longobardi, and Peter Sells. This piece of work is heavily indebted to the works and formal parameters by Professor Roberts, Longobardi, and Van Gelderen, and of course, the great Noam Chomsky, whom I've communicated several times. So before I begin, I'd like to express my thanks and gratitude to everyone here, and all errors remain my own, of course. I said we're in the chat. Right. Before I begin, however, I'd like to propose a structure and a roadmap, because when I was writing this slide, I realized that this is a bit tricky. I think that I haven't done before. That there's a public seminar for both specialists and sort of non-specialists in linguistics. I guess everyone here probably has a different background, also may have a different impression of linguistics. So I think the first step that I want to do is to introduce what linguistics is. So its history and its nature, etc., just to get everyone on the same page. Those of you who know linguistics already, and you can probably switch off and switch on whilst I go into the latter parts. My second step, however, is introduce something more specific and known as biolinguistics, the study of human languages in relation to other types of languages. I mean, believe it or not, there are actually many other types of non-human languages, like machine learning, animal languages, primates, etc. That I do have colleagues who work on these things. Unfortunately I don't work on these things. I focus on human, natural languages. But I think it's probably useful to situate biolinguistics in relation to other types of languages as well. And the third point is the main sort of thrust of my talk today, which is I'm going to propose something that is really quite central in Chomskyan schools of linguistics, namely what is formal simplicity. And all of this will become clear as I go along, but these are the three goals I want to address today. My aims, however, is that in relation to the first one, is to introduce linguistics to you and how it's developed as an academic discipline. I think this may be quite useful for those in our audience who aren't linguists. Secondly, the nature of human language and its cognitive foundations. As we'll see later on, Chomsky, he's proposed, language, the human language is a cognitive phenomenon that is inherent and intrinsic to our biological makeup. So, it's important that, we think of language as a cognitive ability. That's another thing. And the second thing is we should think about some of the old and new perspectives of derivational simplicity. Yeah, I think Uriagereka is remind me. So I should probably go into a presentation, but that would be a little bit better. Just bear with me. Yeah. So if I just go through these things again. Yeah, because as we'll see, the definitions of derivational simplicity, have been defined in different ways, and it's not always easy to work out which is better. So I think you have some new and old definitions that should be sort of discussed together. Right. Okay, if I just I'll show you everything here. Right. So first of all, linguistics. What is it? Is I did a search last night, on linguistics, and they all come up with something like the scientific study of language and structure, including the study of morphology, syntax, phonetics, semantics, pragmatics, etc. These definitions were given by numerous institutes like Wikipedia, the Oxford English and Dictionary, Cambridge, LSA, Britannica, etc. I suppose the one common factor is that linguistics is a scientific study of language, but that's also a very vague definition because what does scientific study mean? So I suppose our first step towards understanding linguistics is to go back to its roots and to see how it's been developed. Linguistics has its roots in the 19th century. That makes it a relatively young sort of scientific and academic discipline because of things like physics or chemistry and biology go back to ancient times. Linguistics really has its origins relatively recently. A group of neo-grammarians will notice some irregularities in the sound correspondences between the sort of IE Indo-European languages. I'm not sure whether John Paulus is here, but John Paulus, my fellow Ronin colleague, he's a classicist, and I also I've studied classics when I was an undergrad at Oxford. So I had to study Latin and Greek, but I also had to study several other sort of IE Indo-European languages like Sanskrit and Hittite, etc. The story goes was that people notice some phonological patterns between these languages. And so what they did was, they tried to reconstruct the proto-language of all of these, European and Indic languages, and also to trace the evolution of sounds from PIE to the various IE languages. Okay, so this is the first endeavor that people tried, which signaled the beginnings of linguistics. Oops, sorry, my slides are good. Right, so a very famous example that classical philologists have used. If we compare some of these cognate words between Latin, Greek, Sanskrit, and Gothic, Gothic being the earliest Germanic language. Germanic languages include modern German, but also modern English. So we may see some similarities here. But the word for father in all of these are related languages: Latin pater, Greek pater, Sanskrit pita, Gothic father, etc. If we just look at them, we see some patterns. We see that they're obviously similar. The word for three, number three, Latin tres, Greek tres, Sanskrit trias, and Gothic tres, etc. The word for brother, frate, brate, and brother, etc. Right. Okay. So you can see that the Germanic examples are clearly are similar to English. So English, father, three, brother, which has set them apart from the other three branches. And then people, they've been trying to form some sort of sound and correspondences between Latin, Greek, Sanskrit, and Gothic, etc. So for example, Latin P, Greek P, Sanskrit P correspond to Gothic F, as you've seen in the words for a father. Latin FR, Greek PHR, Sanskrit BHR, and Gothic BR, etc. Okay, so we would reconstruct two phonemes here. So I'm Indo-European, so BHR. Similarly, for Latin TR, Greek TR, Sanskrit TR, Gothic THR, we would reconstruct Proto-Indo-European TR here. And then the reverse of that is we can also postulate some language change and pathways. So we can then say that the proto-language P becomes Latin P and Greek P, Sanskrit P, and interestingly Gothic F. Okay, so we get Latin, Greek, and Sanskrit that sort of group together as P. Gothic, however, has evolved slightly in forming F. I mean, there are many sort of phonetic similarities between P and F. They're both labial and plosives, etc. But the interesting here is Germanic just seems to have gone off slightly with F. Proto-Indo-European, BH, being so Latin fra, Greek PH, Sanskrit BH, and Gothic B. And lastly, PIET becomes Latin T, Greek T, Sanskrit T, and interestingly, Gothic TH. So Gothic seems to have diverted slightly in forming these fricatives like fur and thur, whereas all the other languages have retained their consonantal value. This is a very famous law called Grimm's law and Werner's law. That's Gothic, namely Germanic, have developed these slightly different types of consonants. All right, so this is a very simple illustration of some of the earliest attempts by Indo-Europeanists in reconstructing, also in detailing exchange in the 19th century. Oops, sorry, is everyone okay? I can hear some noise here. Everyone okay?
I think we're good.
We're good, yeah, okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll play whack-a-mole with the mute button.
Thank you very much. In the next century, so in the 20th century, many interesting things happen. I mean, the two world wars aside, some major figures have developed, on the scientific study of language. So, for example, Ferdinand de Saussure, who was widely considered to be the father of modern linguistics, he was phenomenal. He published loads of papers and articles that completely changed the landscape of linguistics. He also worked on IE and especially the laryngeal theory, which was hugely influential. But the two developments, developments that I would like to point out here was his distinction between long and parole, language and word, and also between synchrony and diachrony. All right, synchrony and diachrony can be seen in the previous slides, if you remember, the sort of rules that I showed you, like Proto-Indo-European P becoming Latin P, Gothic F, etc. Those are diachronic laws, and those show how throughout the history, the original consonant becomes different types of consonants in different related languages. But the Saussure, he influentially introduced, there's also something called synchrony. So how language can be conceptualized as a system. So we're not just looking at laws that occur through time, but also how the entire system changes. And also between Long and Pahot, which becomes influential, and he conceptualized how language, what language is, Long, and how language is used in real life situations, Pahot. Bloomfield took the synchrony and diachrony distinction a bit further, and he tried to develop structuralism. So he published several works in which he tried to develop this idea that your language is a synchronic system, and how in studying linguistics, we're not just looking at how particular things change, but how the whole system changes. So this is in line with Saussure, but also with Kuhn's scientific revolution. And Kuhn, he also tried to introduce, in any type of a scientific investigation, we're looking how the entire system changes rather than particular things that change. Greenberg, he was interested in language a typology, and so he vastly expanded our knowledge of language by looking at the languages that were not IE based, and he was looking at the genetic classification that's similar to what we saw on the previous slide. On the previous slide, we could say the Gothic is a bit special. Gothic has veered off in being its own thing. And Greenberg developed those concepts a bit further in looking at dialects, language and varieties, also language and genetics. Labov, who is still alive and active despite him being 93 years old now, he took Saussure's Pahot concept further and developed social linguistics and language use. He's an absolute giant in our field. And lastly, Chomsky, whom I've emphasized here because his work is going to feature prominently in this story. He's famous for very many reasons, but one of the things that he did was that he introduced this cognitive revolution in linguistics. So yeah, he's trying to urge us to think of language as a cognitive ability. All right, here's busy. Right, if I just to show something, yeah, here is Chomsky. You probably you may recognize him from the news if you watch the non-mainstream news like Democracy Now, etc. On the photo on the left, you'll see that I actually met Chomsky at the LSA Summer Institute 2013, and I managed to take a photo with him. He's famous in both politics and academia because he's fervent and proponent of a left-wing politics, and he's a big critic of the U.S. International politics. And there have been numerous works that detail his life and also his various works, and here are just a few references that I highly recommend that everyone reads if you're interested in the life of Chomsky. But here it is, and his work is highly influential in our field. But just there are these things that I'm missing. Yeah. Oops, sorry. Yeah. So Chomsky, I'm going to focus on Chomsky, the linguist here. People like Lightfoot and Epstein, however, they've attributed Chomsky as the man whose revolution, who is responsible for the so-called cognitive revolution in linguistics. He introduced something called, the universal grammar, which is a biological component in language, which is a species specific. He proposed that human language is a species specific, and that no other species is capable of doing this, what we're doing right now. So if you're reading or listening, i.e. you, I hope, and like if you're writing or speaking, as I'm doing now. No other species, you're not even our closest mammalian cousins like apes and monkeys, orangutans can do this, even though they are genetically closest to us. And so there have been various postulations of a particular genome. So most recently, now there's FOXP2 gene, which is said to be which is said to determine our genetic makeup in terms of how we use language and how we process language, etc. Chomsky, Hauser, and Bob Berger, they've written a very influential paper in which they compare human language to the rest of the animal kingdom, and they come up with this distinction between the language faculty in the broad sense and language faculty in the narrow sense. Language faculty in the broad sense includes everything. So includes our ears, all our senses, our auditory processing organs, our tongue, our mouth, how we speak, etc. Whereas language faculty in the narrow sense is more sort of a cognitive, and it deals mainly with grammar. So how our brain processes language and how that gets externalized to the rest of our body, I suppose. Another very important contribution that Chomsky made, ever since some of his earliest works. So in the 50s, he was already a big proponent of the scientific modeling of linguistic data. He was trying to propose that it was possible to model language with as much rigor as possible, and he was using your standard scientific concept like Occam's eraser, which says that scientific modeling should be maximally simple. We should postulate as few technical devices as possible in order to account a particular natural phenomenon. But this also brings us to something quite striking. Is Roger Martin and Uriagereka, they've introduced something called ontological minimalism and methodological minimalism. Methodological minimalism is more in line with the Occam's eraser, and that we should try to account for data, any form of natural data, as simple as possible, which is a standard scientific procedure. Whereas ontological minimalism is that the object itself is maximally simple. So not only do we seek to account for it, using as few technical devices as possible, we should also think of the actual thing as being as simple as possible. The actual thing here being language. And I knew this goes into the whole debate of minimalism, which is what Chomsky has been arguing for in the past 20-odd years. Right, so a point about biolinguistics. Okay, so we're now entering the second part of my talk here. Lenenberg, he proposed in a very influential volume that it was possible to think of language as a biological phenomenon. So he and Chomsky, they have a similar take on language being a biological phenomenon. Noam Chomsky here introduced the cognitive revolution, so the human language as being part of the human anatomy. And a human, is a species specific, as I said. So only we can do this. No other species can do this. And if we think of it in terms of traditional historical questions, like your language variation and change, the way that for example, we reconstructed Proto-Indo-European and how we detailed the changes in Proto-Indo-European, how that can be sort of tied in with how a biological phenomenon. In which case, we're thinking not just in terms of language data, but also language system. The fact that language is a biological system, and how we try to fit these two things in which also ties in with Saussure's synchrony and diachrony distinction. So if I just yeah, so the bridge between the traditional style of historical linguistics and the more modern style of synchrony, where language is conceived as a cognitive biological phenomenon, and how these two can be brought together. And here we look at Lightfoot. Now Lightfoot, he has done some influential work on first language acquisition, and he also adopts this assumption that a eugesia pre-exists in a normal human brain from birth. Remember that we are assuming that human language is species specific, so it's genetically conditioned. All healthy human babies have this thing at birth, and this thing conditions one's language ability for the rest of his or her life. And he proposed the very famous formula, a UG, which is the genetic component, the primary linguistic data, which is the language environment where where language is heard and used, language is processed, etc. These two things, if you put them together, you get the formation of grammar. So internal grammar is the products or the results of these two things. So a UG has also been argued to consist of universal principles of human language, like the use of verbs, argument structure, case properties, grammatical relations, various phonetic relations. Oh, sorry. And the PLD consists of cues, language data, what the infant hears and perceives, and the product. The product has been distinguished in terms of I language and E language. So internal language, IG is one's linguistic competence, whereas external grammar, EG, is how language is performed. So this also ties in with Saussure's thing about langue and parole, how language is known and how language is used. And more recently, Chomsky, he's introduced this idea of a general cognitive non-linguistic principles, which are also argued to condition, human language and processing and human language acquisition. So Chomsky, in some of his more recent papers, he proposed this formula, which is quite similar, but crucially, there is an addition of what he calls the third factor principles, i.e., some non-linguistic specific general cognitive principles, which also condition the formation of IG. We'll get to these, in due course. Right. Just oops, sorry. Yeah. So we've seen several ways in which language data has been modeled and formalized. And this goes back to the fundamental question of what linguistics is. Linguistics is a scientific study of language, but there are several different ways in which we can model and analyze a language. We saw how the 19th century neo-grammarians, used the comparative method to reconstruct Proto-Indo-European and to trace the change between a proto-language and all the various branches. Saussurean and Bloomfieldian structuralism, Greenberg's typological universals, and then Chomsky. Chomsky proposed something that was highly influential, known as a transformational grammar. It's not the only theory that's available. I mean, there are also other, very influential and popular theories like LFG, HBSG, construction grammar, etc. But I think if we can summarize and encapsulate Chomskyan linguistics, it's transformational. It consists of transformations. That's something that I'll get to in due course, but that's something that I want to point out about Chomsky's work. If we go through Chomsky's his career, which is unique, he has a very powerful life both in linguistics and in politics. But let's focus on Chomsky, the linguist. Some of his earliest work when he was a graduate student at UPenn in the 50s. His master's dissertation, but also a very big manuscript in which he wrote called the logical structure of linguistic theory, and also syntactic structures. I suppose that's young Chomsky, but even then, those works were already amazing, and then they proposed ideas and which are still being used today. The second phase in the 60s, he wrote aspects of theory of a phrase structure, in which he tried to introduce transformations. In the 80s, in 1981, a landmark volume known as the lectures on government and binding, based on the lectures which he gave at Pisa, in which one of my supervisors, Pino Longobardi, was part of. Now that book is amazing. That book was a landmark volume in the history of linguistics, because that's defined the GB model, and but, it was so influential. There was a sequel, some concepts and consequences of GB that came out the year after, in which he tied up some loose ends and elaborates on a few things. The one thing about the main thing about GB is it consists of transformations. So we start with a deep structure, we transform it, and we get surface structure. This is a major contribution that GB has made to the linguistic landscape. In the rest of the 80s, he developed the principles and parameters, which again became a very big thing. In the 90s and the early thousands, he proposed minimalism. Okay, so a landmark volume in 1995 was the Minimalist Program, which builds on some of his earlier works. So his works in 1986, your knowledge of language barriers, and his various papers in 91, 92, and 93, they all lead up to the Minimalist Program, published in 1995. And in the early thousands, he proposed minimalist inquiries and derivation by phase, etc. Those also build on his 1995 book. From 2004 onwards, all the way till now, he's made some modifications to his early minimalist model. So current minimalism contains some technical differences from his earliest minimalist work, which I'll also get to in the main part of my talk. But this is, I suppose, a summary of Chomsky's academic career. I mean, if I can do just a trillionth of this in my work, I will be a happy man. Seriously, this is an absolutely amazing and phenomenal publication record. Right. Okay, so back to this idea of transformations. As I mentioned, I think 2 slides before, is that a transformation, we start off with deep structure, and then we transform it in forming surface structure. So in between, we get a whole series of transformations. The deep structure is where where the thematic structure is formed by principles of a projection. And this this largely consists of argument structure and event structure. A surface structure is where abstract and morphological case is assigned, and also surface structure is where movement and agreement takes place. So we form the deep structure in terms of merge, etc., and then we move and agree things, and then we put them in a different order via these mechanisms. Derivation transformation then leads to spell out. The spell out occurs at SS. So once we've done all the transformations, we spell them out. So we get a rule-based transformation, which is a top-down derivation, and then we get the final bit where we spell out the language structure. And here, so Chomsky says, there are two main components: a phonetic form (PF) and logical form (LF). It's where syntax meets sound and meaning, respectively. So if I just show this schematically. The architecture of Chomsky style transformational grammar is commonly and popularly schematized like this. We start with deep structure. It undergoes some transformations, and then at spell out, it then becomes PF and LF. Okay, so syntax then becomes sound and meaning, etc. In modern, more recent minimalism, however, so DS becoming SS, i.e. the traditional transformations have been remodeled as sort of phase by phase derivation. And also, PF has been retermed as FON, is where the articulatory perceptual factors occur, and LF has been relabeled SEM, which is the conceptual and intentional component. So here is the model that people have often used to conceptualize some Chomsky style transformational grammar. Right. Also, another thing is functional categories. Let me see. Yes, in both principles and parameters and minimalist program, which is the current model, in the functional categories are paramount. Okay. Traditional grammatical properties are given sort of structural representation. Now, this is quite controversial. If we at the bottom of the slide, I've written that not everyone agrees about some functional categories. The other models that I've mentioned, like LFG, HPSG, those models take the grammatical properties to be not structurally represented, but represented elsewhere. So, if you use those non-Chomskyan models, you wouldn't be following these principles. But, it will be, well over, the scope of this particular talk to compare different grammatical models. So I think I'll just stick with Chomsky. And in Chomskyan grammar, functional categories are extremely prominent. And then there's a quote here, given by Uhara, who wrote a fantastic PhD dissertation at the UCL. He, so citing Chomsky, says in the functional categories constitute grammar. So in Chomskyan syntax, grammar equals functional categories. And the traditional, grammatical properties like tense or aspect, mood of the verb, or the definiteness, specificity, number, and gender of the noun, or the clause and focus and topic of the clause, all of these things are represented in syntax. So that's one particular thing that we should have to deal with later on. And also, one thing about the functional categories is that functional categories have now been cartographically projected. So not only do we get all of these things in syntax where they are projected, they also are projected in a particular way. That's the cartography that people have been working on and still are. If I just show you a very simple and a very classic illustration, is the English passivization, which Chomsky used in detail in his 1981, so with the lectures on government and binding work. Passivization. We start from the active sentence, so the professor praised the student. The way we passivize is, even though, for native English speakers, we don't really think about it that much, but this actually is a multi-step transformation. We would delete the subject deletion, something known as the Bourdieu generalization, which I won't get into now, but we would delete the subject, and then we would raise the object to the subject position, and this requires the coupler, the verb to be as well. So we would delete the subject and get an sort of empty subject, praise the student, which is clearly ungrammatical. We would then need to raise the object and get the student was praised. And the original subject may be optionally used as an adjunct. So the student was praised by the professor. This is a very simple, but a very classic illustration of transformations. It's a multi-step process. Right, okay. Parameters and in principles and parameters. As Greenberg has shown that there is a huge amount of linguistic variation, which consists of language universals as well as the language differences. In fact, this goes further back than Greenberg, because if you think back to the Indo-European illustration that I showed you, there we already saw some similarities as well as some differences between some cognate languages, Latin, Greek, Sanskrit, and Gothic. We try to reconstruct the proto-parent form by looking at their similarities. But there are also some differences, like how Gothic has fricatized the consonants, etc. So language universals and differences are fundamental to any type of a linguistic inquiry, really. And we saw from the historical and comparative angle how that works. Parameters are seen as switches. Some famous switches are, for example, the null subject parameter that Rizzi looks at. For those who speak Italian, you will know that the subject isn't obligatory in Italian versus English, but the subject is obligatory, apart from some highly colloquial registers. So people like Rizzi says you would switch between Italian and English, where you would go from a null subject language to a non-null subject language. Word order, similarly. People like you, Travis, you look at your head initial language and the head final languages. So Travis looks at VO and OV. For example, in English, you would get verb before the object. So the professor praised the student, whereas in language like Japanese, you would get OV, the object would come before the V. Oops, let me get it down. And parameters are now conceptualized to be encoded in the functional categories. A very big project as led by Professor Ian Roberts and his various colleagues at the University of Cambridge, has dealt with this perennial issue in great detail. And then you have to look at how parameters, how formal parameters are encoded between languages. And I highly recommend that you look at those if you're interested. But now, functional categories are argued to be where language variation is encoded. Functional categories are also syntactic, and then they are subject to syntactic operations like merge and move and agree, etc. Parameters, parametric variation, therefore, it lies in how functional categories are syntactically realized. As I explained, Chomskyan syntax differs from other things like LFG, HBSG, in that everything is projected, even traditional grammatical properties that one may not think are projected, like verbs or like nouns are. But in Chomskyan style syntax, that's exactly everything is projected. Okay, so you get a functional categories. So okay, if I just move on a little bit. Oops. Right. So Minimalist programs. I've mentioned when I was talking about Chomsky's career, how his ideas are constantly changing, and I mentioned about early minimalism, new minimalism, but also the most recent style of minimalism. The core of the debate is got what is simplicity and how do we define simplicity. Simplicity has been defined in different ways. For example, in early minimalism, Chomsky in 1995 and into the early thousands, etc. There he was saying that movement is more complex than merge. In 2004, Chomsky introduced something called the internal merge versus an external merge. So internal merge is equivalent to the old movement, and there he says that these two types of merge are equivalent, and they are the same. Neither one is more complex than the other. In more recent, very recent work by Chomsky, he introduced some new principles like the principles of projection, and also new simplicity principles like a minimize computation as well as minimal search, etc. So throughout this whole minimalist project, the core of the core question is, how do we define simplicity? Right. So if we look at this tree. In early minimalism, a merge is simpler than move and agree because there Chomsky in 2000 argues that merge consists of second merge. So you would start off with y for example, you would merge y where its base generated. You would then move it to a higher place called x, for example. So you would merge it to a second place. This is known as second merge. Nowadays, however, I think this has been abandoned in the y would be argued to be externally merged in y, but then internally merged in x, and neither is more complex than the other. But within a transformational grammar, one could still say that movement or internal merge presupposes external merge, because in derivational grammar, movement applies after merge. Oh, sorry. There's a typo. Move applies after merge. So you would form the deep structure first before you can move it. Again, that's quite commonsensical. You can only move something that's already there, and so you would have to merge it first before you can do things with it. So internal merge is still logically and temporally sequentially dependent on external merge in this formal grammar. So this leads me to the question as to whether internal merge or movement, is it superfluous? Superfluous not in the sense that it cannot occur, but in the sense that it's an extra step that we may be able to do away with if we can. Now, people who work on formal parametric linguistics. So, for example, Professor Ian Roberts, he's proposed on empirical grounds that there's a hierarchy that we can follow. Is that we would start off that a movement of a phrase is more complex than movement overhead, and movement overhead is more complex than agreement. Agreement is finally more complex than merge, and merge can eventually be eliminated. So we get nothing. So according to this Klein, movement is clearly more complex than agree, and agree more complex than merge. And in his 2007 book, he details this typology of syntactic change. The formation of F merge, i.e. the formation of functional elements, otherwise known as grammatical elements, is a very famous process known as a grammaticalization. And there is copious, and there is plenty of evidence that supports this. Whereas the change from movement to agree largely ties in with the word order change. So how in languages, how there used to be an overt movement, but how that movement can be lost, and we seem to get agreement, and we get the result of there being word order change. According to this stability, we would say that early movement is more complex than agree, which is in turn more complex than merge, which comes back to the question of whether movement is superfluous or not. Well, I think I'll come to an end to my survey. So according to these works that have dealt with simplicity in formal syntax, this Klein, I believe, still holds that the movement is more complex than agree, but it's more complex than merge, and merge can eventually be eliminated to get nothing. So this early minimalism definition of simplicity, that merge is more complex than agree and move, still holds, in the sense that merge is a single step derivational mechanism, whereas and movement involves at least two positions. So you will need to form two positions before you can do agreement and movement, etc. And so in this sense, movement and agreement by extensions are superfluous. We can do without them if we can. And I think this is an important conclusion to make in minimalist syntax. Right, if I just say a big thank you to all of you for attending this webinar, and do please get in touch on everything, both on this presentation and anything else. Thank you very much.